The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
If it's made in Minnesota, who's making it and how?
Yeah, you got that right.
It's the Makers of Minnesota, focusing on the products and services uniquely made in Minnesota, and conversations with the makers, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Minnesota about how they conceived of their products and how they brought them to market. With Stephanie Hansen, it's the Makers of Minnesota.
Hi, it's Stephanie Hansen, and I'm here with the Makers of Minnesota podcast. If you've been listening to our podcast, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. You can always rate our podcast, too. That helps them be found by more people. The podcasts, if you're on Podcast One, you can rate us, also iTunes. And then if you have friends in the Twin Cities area, you can find us on the MyTalk 1071 website under My Shows, and then you pull down the podcast area. And there's not only this Makers podcast, but there are also some other podcasts for you to listen to as well. We are at week 16, I believe, of the Makers podcast. You can give us any feedback that you'd like on Facebook, Makers of Minnesota, or you can find us on Twitter, Makers of MN, and also Instagram. And we try to take shots of our local Makers products. And if you've got any feedback of people you'd like us to talk to, we would love to hear from you. It's always fun to interact with people. So today, our guests are Travis and Kiara Bolton, and they have a company called Bolton Bees, and you can find them at boltonbees.com. And I think I first heard about your bees from your participation in the Minnesota Cup, actually. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Someone in the Minnesota Cup for bees. So I went to the website and I started to check it out. And you guys are making bees, making hives, and making honey. And you're a married couple. Is that right? This is the first time we've had two people on the podcast, too, besides myself. So
that's correct.
Yep, that is correct. We really enjoyed being part of the Minnesota Cup. It was a great opportunity for us. And
you're not the first entrepreneurs that I've had on that just have said, like, A, it was a lot of work, which it is, but B, what a good experience and how many people they got exposed to. You guys, were you winners or were you finalists this year?
We were runners up in our division.
Okay, and was your division the food division?
Yep, food, egg, beverage.
Excellent. So how did you find out about the Minnesota Cup, or did they find you?
We were, one of our friends posted it on Facebook, and we found out and like, hey, we can do this too. So we applied and then just kind of went from there.
Cool social media. So you guys are young. So how do you, like, I want to know your whole story here, all right? So how do you meet, get married, and decide that you're going to make bees?
I should take this one.
Well, so the order was a little bit different.
Sure.
So when I first started doing beekeeping, I was living in China during that time. And I'd been living in China for a number of years, and one of my really good friends is a beekeeper, and she was given an opportunity to start a sustainable economic development project in rural Yunnan village in China.
Cool.
And I could speak Chinese, and she couldn't at that time, and asked me to join along with her. And I didn't know anything about bees, and so I was like, sure, I'll go live in the Himalayan plateau with you.
Sure.
And do bees. And so I did, and I learned about bees, and like it's one of those things that once you kind of get interested in it, it takes over your whole life. And I did it, and like the development project worked out great. My friend's still there, married to a Tibetan man, and is still doing, it's not a project anymore. It's like her life.
Yeah.
But for us, I came back here to Minnesota and wanted to continue to keep bees. It's now a passion that's like in my blood. I have to keep on doing it. And my granddad said I could have bees on his land.
Okay.
So then I was like, great. So I had a couple hives there, and he got into beekeeping with me. And then Travis and I we met, and then Travis got into bees just through osmosis. And we went to Texas, and with my friend's family, and we did some queen breeding work there. And that's when Travis really got inundated with bees, and we started working for hives. And because we were working for hives, we came back to Minnesota, and with the very first time it was like 20 hives we came back with, and we learned how difficult it was to have our bees survive the winter.
So let's back up a second. So there's a lot of bees in Texas, and what people don't know necessarily, and you're the experts here, but I know just enough to be dangerous, is that these hives typically travel around and go to places where they're needed to pollinate things like orange trees and almond trees. And so these hives are loaded up onto semis and moved around the country. And where we got into some trouble was we got into colony collapse disorder, where there was some question, hives were dying, and there was some question, are the bees overworked? Are they being killed by pesticides? And it sort of started the conversation, I feel like, maybe 15 years ago about, hey, what's going on with the bees? What is happening with the bees? And how important bees are to us. Help our listeners understand the importance of a bee.
Yeah, I mean, so bees pollinate. What's the percentage of the food we eat? It's like 75% of the fruits and vegetables that we eat. It's very important. Colony collapse disorder, I think it is bees being overworked, but it's also having healthy resources for the bees, in our backyard, in the fields around our towns. It's farming practices, but it is largely to do with bees being overworked. That's why I think part of our business, why it was so well received, was that we are non-migratory beekeepers, meaning that our bees stay in Minnesota the whole year round, just like our customers who are backyard beekeepers. Their bees stay in their backyard the whole year round. They're not bringing their hives to California. They want to have 2 or 3 hives. They want to maybe get a couple 100 pounds of honey, and they want to give that away as gifts. And those backyard beekeepers struggle year after year because the only source for hives to buy are from people that are part of this pollination route that just brings them from nectar flow to nectar flow the whole year round, and their hives never have to sustain this winter that we deal with up here.
So you're in Texas, and you are seeing bee colonies, you're seeing the problem with the bees, but you're also from Minnesota, and you're thinking, hey, maybe we can do something here that will help us breed a Minnesota bee. Is that?
So the Texas thing happened because this girl that Kiara worked with in China, her family, they're migratory beekeepers from North Dakota who winter their bees in Texas, and they are queen breeders. So that's what brought Kiara down there, kind of for experience, to see, because it's an opportunity to work with a lot of colonies in a short amount of time. Whereas up here, you have a few colonies in your backyard. You can learn a lot. If you go down to Texas, or if you get on one of these bigger operations, you learn things very, very quickly.
That's actually where we learned how to queen breed. And so it's a very specialized skill set to be able to graft queens.
Tell me how it even happens. Do you stick? I'm just okay, I'm thinking about bull pollination and cows and the sex parts, and I'm thinking, how would you do this with a bee?
It's only a little bit different.
So do you stick a little something in there?
No, it's actually a lot different.
So what we do is, this might be kind of technical, but all female bees start off the exact same way, and all bees in a colony, majority of them are females. There are some drones too, and there's a male. But they all start off the exact same way. An egg is laid, and then after 3 days, they turn into a larva.
Okay.
And so even a queen starts off that way.
Sure.
And so what I do then is I take this grafting tool, which is kind of like a dental tool.
Yeah.
And I very gently pick up that larva and place it down into another, a plastic cell, because the bees then, on the 3rd day, know what to feed, if it's going to be a queen or if it's going to be a worker bee, know what to feed that bee depending on the size of the cell it is in. And then what that bee eats determines what it'll be in the future. So
Weird. How cool that someone figured that out.
So I pick up that larva super gently, because if you mess up, the whole thing is ruined.
Yeah.
And so you pick it up and gently transplant it into this other cell, and they feed it royal jelly, a diet purely of royal jelly. And on the other hand, we also need to have a hive that feels these basic survival instincts. They need to feel utterly queenless. They need to feel like they're on a major nectar flow. And we put these queen cells into this hive, and they're just desperately eager to raise these queens for us at this point. So that's how we raise the cells.
Okay.
But that's just the technical part of it. But the real challenge is to select the hives that we're going to breed from. So we overwinter hives. There are some hives that die and they're not in our gene pool then. And then the ones that survive are in our gene pool. But then we look for who has the highest honey yield. Who did we have to, not feed as much sugar water to in the fall? Who did we...
Who had a nicer temperament?
Who had a nicer temperament? Who has a low mite load? Who didn't struggle with diseases or pests? And so we look for all these different characteristics that we then select for who's more hygienic. And we breed from those hives in this manner. And then we put them into this queenless colony, and they raise these queen cells, which we then have to take out before they hatch. Because if they were to hatch, like that one queen that would hatch first will go and kill all the rest of them.
Right.
So we have to take them out and put them in these other queenless hives. And that's pretty much how you do it.
So when that queen emerges, she emerges as a virgin queen. So as a virgin, we have to make sure that we pull her out of the cell builder in time. We put her into queenless colonies that we've created, in our other apiaries. That queen emerges as a virgin. She's not mated yet. She can't lay eggs. And over the next 5 days, she'll grow in the colony. She'll walk around. Then around day 5 to 10, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter, she'll go on her mating flights. And at that point, that's when she mates with the drones. So we can affect the half of the genetic material by breeding from queens that we like. Then to get the male genetic material, that's all open mating. So at that point, she goes out to mate with 10 to 20 drones.
She's horny. She goes out. She finds some other bees, man bees, and you don't control the man bees.
Right.
But what's interesting is the drones, the man bees, they have only one purpose in life, is to wait for that virgin queen to fly by. I mean, before that, they're just kind of eating honey and sunbathing. But when that virgin flies by, the fastest one is able to mate with her. And she mates up to like 20 drones at a time for her life. But upon mating, that drone dies.
Oh.
So it's like that
so
is
brutal.
Yeah.
He's giving his all, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is all pretty fascinating. And as you're telling me all of this, here's what I'm thinking, because I'm weird. God, they must never get a vacation or a day off, because it's so exacting and so time specific when you get these bees in their different phases of their lives.
There is a perk to being non-migratory in that our hives get essentially put to bed for the winter. Like they're so
it's seasonal that you have to work like dogs in the season,
so to speak. I mean, we still have wax to process and honey to jar, the whole winter, and business ideas to plan. But it is like, for our winter, we're not carting our bees to California. We're not, we're here just hoping that we did everything right the whole season and that our hives survive.
So tell me about the day that the bees wake up and what that feels like to you after you've waited all winter, you've done your work, and you're waiting for them. And how do you know they wake up? Do you hear them?
Well, it's spring. It's when, and you start hearing the snow melt off your roof a little bit. It's like it's go time. You just watch the temperatures. You know kind of what it takes for them to be able to go out on their. And so when, in the springtime, what they're most excited about is their cleansing flight, because they don't go to the bathroom in the hive. So that when they have that first day when they can go fly, they're erupting out of the hive to go to the bathroom. So we're there, and we see that, and it's very exciting.
How do you, mean, not to be weird, but do you see them like go poop or potty?
All over the place.
If they land on you, they're gonna poop on you.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
What is bee poop like? Like a speck?
It's kind of like, like a speck. Yeah, but it's
okay.
Like one time I wore like a nice jacket out, and at the end of checking hives, my jacket was covered in these bee specks.
Okay.
But at that point, you're not really out of the woods yet. So that first cleansing flight's like, okay, that's good. But then, as the season progresses, your trees start leafing out a little bit. You start thinking, okay, we're getting closer. At that point in Minnesota, fortunately, you start seeing pollen come in, which is just a beautiful aspect of living in Minnesota, is that you have these early pollen resources. They start feeling a little better. It's like, okay, things are coming in. Then when you see dandelions start to bloom, that's when you start, okay, the season is really, it's going to start picking up here. You actually have significant nectar coming in. at that point, it's the season's on and it's exciting.
And you have honey. The name of your honey is Bolton Bees honey, and you have different types of honey. I watched a cute little video on your website about you making the jars of honey. Honey takes on different flavor characteristics from different places the bees have been, the terroir, like a wine or water for sake. Were you interested in the honey first, or is the honey just like, hey, we have these bees, we may as well make some honey?
Well, honey, originally it was just an awesome byproduct for the bees. And then now it's turning into, there's quite a demand for it.
Yeah.
And so, originally everything that we do it 100%. So we're like, let's do honey. It's an awesome byproduct. So we made these great jars.
Who's your graphic designer? Your graphics are beautiful.
My good friend Matt Gorey.
Yeah, they're great. And your website's real cute too.
Thank you.
BoltonBees.com. Okay, so sorry, you're making your honey.
Yep, so we're making the honey, and so now, part of what we're doing is we're expanding our honey operation too, because there is such a demand for our location-specific honey that we have, and it's true. Each location, the honey tastes totally different from a location even 30 miles away, just because the flowers are in bloom in that area. There's some honey that has a spicy aftertaste. Some of it's kind of a sweet forefront taste. And it's really, you want to eat honey that's local to your area. And now this is all honey in Minnesota, if you're from Minnesota, is local to your area. But now you can get even more particular.
Even more local.
Even more local.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I've been exposed to something. I have a friend that had allergies, and someone told them, hey, you should eat this bee pollen because it exposes you to the antigens in the air that are causing you to have allergies, and you will have less allergies by eating this stuff. Have you had experience with that or heard about that?
You hear both sides of the coin on that one. I am a believer in that. It makes perfect sense. You take in the things that you have an allergic reaction to in small doses, and over time, you kind of get over it.
You build up a resistance.
You build up a resistance.
Well, I have a younger sister who was given shots of what she's allergic to grow her resistance. And essentially, this is the same idea. You're ingesting the pollen that you're allergic to.
The key thing in that is that you can buy honey from your area all day long, but if they're not processing it right, you're not always going to get those pollens. I shouldn't say processing it right. We believe processing it right is pretty much almost doing little to no processing. It's pretty much right out of the comb.
Yep.
So we only do very coarse filtering. We just let our honey settle out, so you get all that pollen in there. We're not trying to microfilter it out.
Yep. It's interesting that people are selling now, bee pollen in their areas, and is that you have honey in your line? Tell me about. So you have some different honeys here. You mentioned they're a little bit subtle. What's your best seller?
It's kind of tough to say. I'd say one of the things that we do on our honeys is that we have a taste testing. And with that taste testing, people give us words to describe what each one tastes well with and what they taste like. And one thing they say, like, oh, this one's really good on toast. This one's really, great with hard cheeses. And so which one I'd say is a bestseller kind of depends on
how you would use it.
How you'd use it, just like how you'd use wine.
Yep.
Which one do you want to drink with fish?
Give me one for toast and then give me one for cheese.
So Granddad's is good on toast, and Granddad's is from Washington County area. That's our only honey right now that's from kind of closer to the metro area. Our other 4 honeys are from northern Minnesota.
And actually, the Granddad's honey, each of our honeys have a story on it. And that one tells the story of my granddad and his involvement with beekeeping and how it transformed his life.
And that was interesting, too. So I'm all over the place. Give me one that goes on cheese, and then I'll ask my next question.
So our Martini honey, which is from Sabika, Minnesota, which is a very small town in northern Minnesota. There's a big Amish community up there. There's lots of organic farming. People are pretty much just have beef cattle and dairy cattle, so there's lots of alfalfa. Just a really healthy area for bees. But what we found when we were extracting all of our yards separately, this Martini honey had a real distinct kind of spice to it. And when we had our taste testing with all of our friends, everybody's like, oh, this would be good on hard cheeses. And then we started doing that, and it's just amazing.
Okay.
Hard cheeses, yeah.
So a good hard cheese honey. I like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed when I was on your website is that you're selling these queens, right? And you can also purchase hives from you.
Yep.
And you have like northern Minnesota bees. Like those are the badass, hardier bees, right?
Yeah.
It's tougher up there.
So where up there are you doing this? Like, what part of the region would you be in up there?
Well, it's kind of a
Park Rapids
area.
Okay.
So that'd be kind of north central, I would say. But yeah, it's around Park Rapids, Minnesota. It's kind of, we're in Akeley, Minnesota, Sabika, Minnesota, Monaga, Minnesota. These are small towns in northern Minnesota.
And do you contract with people you know or you like, and they help you, or you go up, and how does that work?
We put a lot of time on the road. It's just us. We manage all of our own colonies.
So you lease land from someone, and you go and you do your very exacting process?
We've been able to have landowners come to us, and we love landowners when they come to us. We're always looking for more places. People come to us and they say, hey, we would love to have bees on our land. Do you want to have bees there? And we say, yeah. And in return, we give them honey. This is a age-old landowner, beekeeper trade that's been going on forever. So we give them, as much honey as they would ever want for that year. And then we get to put bees there.
Yeah.
The obvious question, like, do you get stung? I mean, I've been around honeybees, and it's not been a problem for the most part, but do you get stung?
Yeah, I said that you got stung, 40 times yesterday?
Yeah, I got stung a lot, but that was my fault.
This time of year, bees are they're not super happy because it's warm enough for them to fly around, but there's no nectar sources because at the end of the year, so they can be a little crabby. And Kiara was putting in mouse guards, I think. Right?
Yeah, I was putting in mouse guards, and I got stung.
Mouse guards?
Yeah.
Because do mice get into your...
Oh, yeah. The mice, they want, someplace warm, and what's better than a nice warm beehive?
They're not vulnerable right now, per se, but we put in the mouse guards now pretty much for, like, February, March. That's when
don't
the
mice
will move
get
in.
stung? No, they don't, because the bees are asleep?
The bees don't really sleep. They kind of cluster together, and they just kind of shiver, and they keep it a constant about 85 degrees within the hive. And you can there's been experiments done monitoring the heat within the hive, and it's warmer in the center and a little bit colder, and so they kind of rotate in, and they expel water throughout the hive, and that's why you need lots of ventilation in your hive.
Yeah,
there's many reasons of how you're able to overwinter your hive successfully. You need genetics, but you also need to be able to prepare your hive well.
Yeah.
But what happens is the cluster moves up as the winter. So the cluster just moves up and consumes honey as the winter moves forward. As that cluster gets past that bottom box and it's cold, they won't break cluster when it's cold. Their main mission is to keep maybe a tiny amount of brood, young emerging bees warm, and the queen warm. So a mouse could easily walk right in,
and
go in the bottom box,
there.
and the bees won't come down there and sting the mouse because they just have to focus on their cluster and staying warm.
And it's toasty warm, those
It's toasty
mice.
warm. Yeah.
We put mouse guards on
to
prevent them from doing that. And I got stung a lot yesterday because I forgot smoker fuel, which is, you need to smoke the hive, and I did it without doing that. Yeah. Foolish me, and I got stung.
We work barehanded typically, and that's kind of we feel like that's a good way for us to always be assessing temperament in hives. So we do get stung. I mean, it's part of beekeeping.
And you got stung 40 times. Like, if I got stung by a bee 40 times, I'd have, like, a massive reaction, I would assume. You've probably been building up your resistance to the stinging.
Mm-hmm.
So did you, like, swell? Did you feel ill? Did you just, like, I got stung 40 times and got in your car and went home?
It's kind of annoying, but other than that, it's not. I don't swell anymore.
Okay. Yeah, because some people, like, I'm not allergic to bees, but it itches and it swells and it's just...
Yeah.
After we go through winter in which we're not getting stung, we get stung again in the springtime, I swell. It's, right now I've been...
quickly build up.
But quickly build up resistance again. But then now it's the end of summer, I've been stung, tons of times throughout the summer. Nothing affects me.
So people are really excited about bees. I was on your site. Like, your bees are selling out like crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even have any bees, pretty much, right?
Yeah, we have to be careful.
You've got some queens coming next spring, but so you're this really sweet, earnest, married couple. Can you, or are you at all interested in, like, is this going to grow? Do you have to bring other people in and train them? Because it is such an exacting science, and you're relying on each other. Mm-hmm. As an entrepreneur, like, do you want this to grow more than a certain amount, or are you comfortable that this is more of a lifestyle for you? I'm curious about that.
It's kind of a mixture. We're wanting to grow as big as we can and try to keep it as small as we can at the same time. We are wanting to, hire more people on when we need to, but we want to kind of reach that limit first before we need to do that.
Okay.
And so, I mean, Yeah, right now we're able to, I'd say we're probably able to do double the amount that what we do this past year by ourselves. And after that point, probably we'll need to have more help.
Yeah. So we try to walk a fine line to stay sane with how
Yeah.
much we're working. But we do have interest in growing, but we also do want to stay local and stay a family business, you know.
So in the winter, what do you do? Do you just not work? Do you like get a bartending job? What feels good to you? Like,
I'm also a licensed contractor.
okay,
And
that's always handy.
yeah. So I got a project that I found over the last, little while, and I'm just gonna do an addition on a friend's house
Yep.
out in
We build
Corcoran, Minnesota, and we build equipment.
we
Yeah,
build
there's also-
equipment, we bottle our honey,
Yep.
we process wax, we do things that we don't have time for in the summer.
Mhm.
Do you sell your wax? And when you say you process it, what are you processing it to do?
Well, this is actually going to be the first year doing that. And our plan is to sell wax.
Okay.
We don't know. We haven't quite figured out how exactly. Maybe we'll do it in forms of candles. Maybe we'll just do it in raw
Yes.
wax for people.
People put that on their cheese trays, and you kind of chew on it and
Mhm.
Yeah.
get that crystallized honey taste. What you're doing with the queens seems really unusual to me.
Mhm.
That you're really breeding them not only for our region but literally our towns.
hmm
Is that something that other people are doing in the United States, or is that unique to you?
There are a few other people who are doing it, but not on the same scale as we are.
And
Well,
is that
in Minnesota? That is out on the East Coast and on the West Coast. There are some people that are really pushing breeding from survivor stock. Buy bees from your local area. They're selling nukes and selling queens. But in Minnesota, right now there's really not anybody else selling colonies that are bred from survivor stock in Minnesota. There are a few other queen breeders, but pretty much we're the only company that's selling colonies.
And can you stop the decimation of the bees by doing that?
You can help.
Yeah,
You can
I
help.
think buying local bees is a great place to start. Besides buying local bees, the only other option is buying bees from migratory beekeepers, which we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And those bees have to endure the stressors of pollination,
The traveling
the
bees.
traveling. They're all sharing diseases and pests with each other. They're buying packages, which are, random bees from random hives shooken together into like a ventilated box, given
Yeah.
a random queen, and then, given to a climate that they, aren't genetically adapted to survive in.
And I'm assuming when you were in China, nobody was importing or driving bees around.
No. It was a totally different species of bees. There's Apis cerana, and here we have Apis mellifera.
Yep.
But it's same idea of which, local bees is what you need. Because if you have local bees here in Minnesota or even in northern part of the United States here, you are able to now be able to have, bees that can survive your climate
Yep.
and bees that are sharing the same resistance to stress and mites and diseases and surrounding your area. So that we can, as a group, as a whole, you can grow a resistance. When you're getting outside bees coming in, and it's like you're growing a resistance, and now this outside bee comes in, you have to kind of readjust.
Yeah, 'cause as you get an area to have more people that are buying local bees or trying to do it themselves in their own backyard. Maybe some people are raising queens in within their own operation, but maybe they're not selling them, but they're doing it for themselves. And as you do that, you have these colonies that are doing well in your area, and those colonies have drones in those colonies. So then when we have a queen that we just raised and it's going on its mating flight, and now it's mating with a
Healthier drones,
higher
yeah.
percentage of drones that have also already survived our Minnesota winters. It helps everybody. But if you have drones, that are coming from all over the world, country, it just gets
So
it's tough.
education could help. You talking to people that are interested in bees and have hives could help proliferate more interest in specifically local bees.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all pretty interesting. Let's talk about one other thing that makes me nervous as it pertains to the bees, because I'm a flower grower, so
Yeah.
I try to grow flowers that bees and butterflies like. this whole Zika virus, and the mosquitoes are carrying this virus, and they're killing the mosquitoes, and in doing so, they're inadvertently killing lots of bees.
Scary.
Yeah, and what is, I think, the most scary part about it is that these beekeepers don't really know when they're spraying. They just wake up one morning and their hives are dead.
Yeah.
Do you think that these individual localized bees may have some better resistance to some of these pesticides, or is it just no way?
Well,
That Zika virus, that there's stuff that they're spraying for that, it just nukes the hive as far as I understand. I think I don't know, it would, maybe there'd be some super bee that could have resistance to that, but that's pretty harsh. It's a harsh chemical.
And we, at this point, don't have Zika here because it's been primarily in the south, so maybe there'll be more reliance on these northern bees.
yeah. Well, the thing is like, so if we were to breed for resistance to the Zika spraying, what we would do is, be in that area, and then they'd spray, and all of our bees die except for like 5 colonies. And then from those 5 colonies, we then breed off of those in anticipation that they'll continue to spray. At this point, our bees up here haven't had to withstand that spraying.
Right.
While we have had our bees have to withstand other types of spraying on other farmland around here. And we do see effects of some of our bees having and some of our bees not having effects. And so we try to breed from those that are not affected from, soybean spraying or things like that.
This is a really dumb question, but do you get sad? Like when you lose a hive that you've worked on, does it make you like sad? Is it like a pet dying, or is it a little less anthropomorphized?
It's sad, yeah. You want to see all your colonies healthy and thriving, and when you see one that was doing well and it doesn't survive, yeah, it is sad.
Like, for instance, this year we had a new yard that we brought a bunch of bees in, and we bred all these great queens from, other hives, and we put them into the hives at this new yard. And then they're doing great. We came back, 2 weeks later, and they're all doing horrible. And the reason why is because of pesticide spraying.
There's some sort of pest that gets in soybean fields, and there's a spraying that happens around in August. And we never really encountered it too much before, but it was a really interesting thing that we encountered this year. But those hives they're kicking it right now, and I think they're getting better.
You got to give a lot of extra love.
Yeah, we definitely had to really be attentive to those hives.
So will you use that same yard next year since they've already been exposed once?
We're going to be very, we're
going to try to find the farmer and see if they're going to rotate the crop and try to get it in tune with what their pesticide spraying schedule is. So that way, if they're able to notify us, then we can take precautions against it.
Sometimes your efforts are better spent in rather than trying to breed resistance to some of these terrible chemicals out there. It's better to spend time, maybe, talking to the farmer, or maybe, trying to go through policy and trying to get, things passed that make it harder for people to just spray willy-nilly in their field.
Right.
Like they have to really abide by certain rules. They have to have the need to spray. That's a new thing. With this, I can't think of what it is, this pest that's in the soybean fields that they spray for in August.
Like an aphid.
And the aphid that a lot of farmers, what we've been told is that they just spray regardless. There's a chance it's there. They're just going to spray. They want to cover make sure that they don't have any losses. And I can understand why a farmer does that, but if they don't actually have the need, it really does a lot of harm that isn't necessary.
And they may not even know. I mean,
Yeah.
most farmers, they're growing food, right? They're trying to, I don't know.
Yeah, they're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to do the right thing.
So, if we're in this whole ecosystem, I feel bad sometimes for the farmers because they need to spray some things because it's their livelihood, and yet if it's killing other things, I mean, it's kind of a quagmire for sure.
Yeah. What we have done this year is when we've seen mosquito control, although it's not Zika virus, there's still mosquito control around, and we've notified them where our apiaries are. And when we ever see someone coming around doing their routine maintenance, we make sure that they're not spraying for adult mosquitoes, which what we have learned is almost, no effect on the actual mosquito population. And you're spraying chemicals just right up into the air, and it really is harmful to bees.
Yeah. But they've been pretty user-friendly. They've been very conscious of where our bee yards are, and they've been pretty good to work with. So we've been pleased with that.
All right. Well, people can find your honey, I know, at the Golden Fig in St. Paul. Is there anywhere in Minneapolis that they can find it?
Grassroots Gourmet.
Oh,
at the
Grassroots Gourmet.
Midtown-
That's actually
Midtown
where
Global Market.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Travis and Kiara. Sorry, I knew I was going to do that. It's Bolton Bees. You can find them at boltonbees.com. And if we just recap here, Granddad's was the one for toast, and Martini was the one for the hard cheeses. I really appreciate you guys being in here today. It was super fun. Congratulations on your finalists and your qualification in the Minnesota Cup. That's a pretty amazing story, and I am going to just be anxiously watching your bees.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us here.